What do you actually know about tornado intensity? Most people can picture a funnel cloud. Most people know to take cover. But ask them what separates an EF0 from an EF5, and the answer gets vague fast. 6 categories, 1 scale, and a range of destruction that goes from peeling a few shingles all the way to erasing entire cities from the map. EF0 and EF5 sit at opposite ends of that spectrum, and the distance between them is almost impossible to wrap your head around until you actually walk through it, level by level. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's start at the bottom, the beginning. The point where most people see the damage and think, that wasn't so bad. EF0. Wind speeds between 65 and 85 miles per hour. On paper, that sounds manageable. In practice, it's enough to make you regret leaving your patio furniture outside. At this level, shingles get peeled off rooftops, gutters tear free and clatter across driveways. Siding cracks and warps. Branches that have been holding strong for decades snap clean off. Trash cans turn into rolling projectiles. A trampoline that was sitting peacefully in a backyard suddenly becomes airborne, spinning across 3 yards and into a neighbor's car. In 2021, an EF0 touched down in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. It lasted less than 90 seconds. In that time, it ripped a wooden privacy fence apart and sent the planks through the back window of an SUV. It toppled a playground structure. It tore the fascia board clean off the front of a house. Nobody was killed. A few people were treated for cuts from broken glass. The damage looked almost tidy compared to what comes later on this scale. But make no mistake, if you were standing outside when it happened, you would not have called it tidy. You would have called it terrifying. EF0 tornadoes are the ones people dismiss. Was that even a tornado? Maybe it was just a really bad gust. It was a tornado. And the distinction matters because underestimating EF0 is how people end up caught outside when EF1 rolls through. And EF1 is where things start to get genuinely ugly. Wind speeds between 86 and 110 miles per hour. That extra push makes an enormous difference. This is where a house stops being a safe place to ride it out above ground. Roofs don't just lose shingles at EF1. They lose entire sections. Garage doors crumple inward. Regular doors get blown clean off their hinges. Windows across whole neighborhoods blow out at once. Trees don't just lose branches. They get uprooted, yanked from the earth and dropped across roads. Cars get pushed sideways. Some get lifted slightly before being set back down, rotated at odd angles. In 2019, an EF1 moved through a stretch of central Iowa and left behind a trail that took emergency crews 3 days to clear. Mature oak trees, some of them over 80 years old, were toppled across roads in every direction. A metal storage building was peeled open like a tin can. Mobile homes in a nearby park were destroyed. The residents had gotten out in time, just barely. What stayed with people afterward wasn't the size of the damage, it was the speed of it. From the first warning to complete destruction, less than 4 minutes. That's the rhythm of a tornado. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. And at EF1, you're already running out of time to make good decisions. The only right move is to be underground, or in an interior room with no windows before it arrives. Because at EF2, being anywhere above ground in the path of the storm becomes a question of survival, not comfort. EF2. Wind speeds between 111 and 135 miles per hour. This is where tornado intensity explained in numbers starts to feel completely inadequate. The numbers don't capture what it looks like when an entire section of a well-built home peels away and tumbles across a field. They don't capture the sound. Survivors consistently describe EF2 tornadoes as something beyond wind. It's a roar with pressure behind it, something that vibrates in your chest and doesn't stop. The kind of sound that tells every instinct in your body to get underground right now. At EF2, roofs aren't damaged, they're removed. Exterior walls cave in or blow out. Heavy pickup trucks get lifted off the ground and thrown. Large trees snap at the trunk rather than being uprooted. An entire house can lose its top floor while the bottom floor remains standing, exposed, and open to the sky. Flying debris at this level isn't just dangerous, it's lethal. 2x4s moving at over 100 miles an hour hit with the force of a spear. In 2020, an EF2 struck a rural community in western Tennessee. A farmhouse that had stood for over a century lost its entire roof and 2 exterior walls within seconds. The family inside survived because they were in the basement. Outside, the debris field stretched over half a mile. A tractor was found wrapped around a tree line. Another structure, a small barn, simply vanished. The foundation was still there. The barn was not. Recovery from an EF2 isn't measured in days, it's measured in months. Insurance adjusters, contractors, temporary housing. Life interrupted and put on hold in ways that ripple outward long after the debris is cleared. And as devastating as that is, EF2 is still only the midpoint. The scale has 3 more levels to climb. The next one doesn't just change the degree of destruction, it changes its character entirely. EF3. Wind speeds between 136 and 165 miles per hour. At EF3, the tornado stops damaging structures and starts dismantling them. Well-built homes don't just lose roofs or walls at this level, they lose entire stories. 2-story houses get reduced to single-story ruins in seconds. Steel-framed buildings buckle. Vehicles aren't just tossed, they're thrown. Significant distances. Trees aren't snapped or uprooted, they're stripped. Bark gone, branches gone, just raw, pale trunks left standing like ghosts. And debris. At EF3, debris stops being a side effect and becomes its own weapon system. Pieces of lumber, chunks of concrete, twisted sections of metal roofing, all of it moving at velocities that make a mockery of walls and windows. There is almost no above-ground shelter that provides meaningful protection from a direct EF3 hit. If you are in a house when an EF3 passes over, your survival depends almost entirely on whether you got underground before it arrived. During the 2011 super outbreak, one of the deadliest tornado events in American history, multiple EF3 tornadoes carved paths through communities across the Southeast. Entire neighborhoods were leveled. Roads were buried under debris so dense that emergency vehicles couldn't get through for hours. First responders described driving through areas they had lived in their whole lives and not being able to recognize a single landmark. Everything that marked a place as a place was gone. That erasure, that loss of recognizability, that's one of the most psychologically devastating things about EF3 and above. It's not just that buildings are destroyed, it's that the physical memory of a community disappears with them. Streets are unidentifiable. Trees that used to mark boundaries are gone. People stand in places they've known for decades and feel completely lost. And EF3 is still not the top. The top is still 2 steps away. And each step from here changes everything. EF4. Wind speeds between 166 and 200 miles per hour. Tornado intensity explained, at EF4, means you are no longer talking about damage to structures. You are talking about the near total elimination of them. Well-engineered homes built to modern code, bolted to their foundations, braced and reinforced, are not just destroyed at EF4. They are dismantled and scattered. The wind doesn't care what the house is made of. Wood, brick, cinder block, it all goes. What's left behind is a foundation slab, some twisted plumbing if you're lucky, and a debris field that can stretch for miles. Asphalt gets peeled off roads. Topsoil gets stripped from fields. The land itself gets scarred. Heavy trucks, commercial vehicles, even freight containers get picked up and thrown hundreds of feet. Trees aren't just stripped. They're sometimes removed entirely, roots and all, leaving behind nothing but a hole in the earth where something living used to be. In 2014, an EF4 tore through parts of Nebraska and left behind damage that engineers spent weeks analyzing. One home, a recently constructed, code-compliant brick structure with a reinforced roof, was found to have had its entire upper half removed and deposited over 400 feet away. The lower walls had partially collapsed inward. The foundation was intact. The house was gone. A vehicle from that property was found 3 blocks away, crumpled against the side of a building that had itself already been partially destroyed. Surviving an EF4 is about one thing and one thing only: getting underground before it arrives. There is no other answer. Interior rooms on the lowest floor give you a chance in an EF2. In an EF4, that chance drops to nearly 0. Basements, storm shelters, underground. That's the line between the outcome you can live with and the one you can't. And somehow, after all of that, there is still one level left. EF5. This is where the Enhanced Fujita Scale ends. Not because we ran out of numbers, but because at EF5, the concept of measuring damage to structures largely breaks down. There's nothing left to measure. Wind speeds exceed 200 miles per hour with no defined upper limit. These are the strongest tornadoes ever confirmed on Earth, and the word destruction doesn't quite cover what they do. Obliteration comes closer. Anchor-bolted homes, the kind built specifically to resist extreme wind, get ripped off their foundations entirely and scattered. Multi-story reinforced buildings collapse inward. Concrete walls fail. Steel beams don't just bend, they snap. Freight trains get knocked off tracks. Massive trees get debarked down to bare wood, and sometimes the trunks get removed entirely. Cars and trucks become projectiles, traveling hundreds of yards through the air before impact. The ground itself gets scoured, pavement gouged, topsoil stripped down several inches. The landscape after an EF5 doesn't just look damaged, it looks like something that was never there. The Moore, Oklahoma tornado of 2013 is one of the clearest examples on record. Winds estimated at over 210 miles per hour. A path of destruction stretching 17 miles. An elementary school flattened. Over 1,000 homes were destroyed. Survivors described watching their houses rise off the ground, whole and intact, before disintegrating in seconds. Not piece by piece, all at once, just gone. Forensic engineers who assessed EF5 damage sites often describe the challenge of confirming where specific structures stood, not because records are unclear, but because there is so little physical evidence remaining. No walls, no framing, no debris concentration large enough to indicate a specific building, just a scoured slab and a general direction the debris traveled. That is what sits at the top end of EF0 and EF5 on this scale. Total, unambiguous, inarguable erasure. Tornado intensity explained across 6 categories sounds orderly, clinical even. But there is nothing orderly about the reality of standing in what used to be your neighborhood and realizing you cannot find your street. The Enhanced Fujita Scale exists to help us understand what happened after the fact. What it cannot fully capture is the speed, the sound, the violence of air moving faster than almost anything on Earth, tearing through everything we build and leaving nothing recognizable behind. EF0 reminds you that tornadoes are real. EF5 reminds you that nature doesn't negotiate. If this kind of deep breakdown is your thing, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.